Welcome. My name's Andrew Wotton. I'm one of the directors of ProtectED CIC, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our event today, which is the evolution of campus security towards effective institutional security and the benefits during COVID-19. So thank you very much for taking the time out to join us today. And just to let everyone know that we are actually recording this webinar. This is the second in the series of ProtectED webinars on the theme Safeguarding the Student Experience. These events are all related to specific aspects of the ProtectED Code of Practice, with today's webinar relating to the ProtectED section, Core Institutional Safety and Security. So first of all, some housekeeping. Can you all please introduce yourself in the chat so that people can see who's attending this session? I think we have quite a few speakers, quite a few attendees scheduled to attend today's session, so it'd be nice for people to know who's there. And secondly, we'll be running the Q&A session at the end with our speaker at the end of the webinar. So we've enabled the Q&A feature. So there's a window, a Q&A window you should be able to access from the bottom of the toolbar. So please, if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A window. I'm very pleased to welcome Professor Caroline Davey, one of my fellow ProtectED CIC directors, and we're delighted this afternoon that Caroline will be interviewing Trevor Jones, who is Executive Chair of the Association of University Chief Security Officers, AUCSO, Head of Security at the University of Salford, and also one of the co-founders of ProtectED. Trevor has been chair of AUCSO since 2016 and at the University of Salford for the past 10 years, supporting safety and well-being of our university students. Caroline.
Thank you ever so much, Trevor, for joining us. I know that at the moment it's a very busy time for you. And my first question relates to COVID-19. There's been a few stories in the press over the past few days about COVID-19 and the issues facing students in Manchester. And I just wanted to start by asking you, how is everything at the University of Salford at the moment?
Thanks, Caroline, and good afternoon, everybody. Well, the University of Salford has the same issues, I think, as the vast majority of universities around the country. We have had a number of parties that have gone on, as everyone else has. I think we've started to get on top of that now. I am pleased that we finally got up our testing station in one of our buildings today. It's been coming for quite a few months, but it's up and running at last, initially for students and staff, and then the local community. We've put it in a building that's not in the middle of campus, but right on the edge, so people don't have to walk through campus who are ill. So I think we're doing okay. We're doing okay. I know a lot of people we've all got issues around COVID-19, but I think at this time of year it's very strange for all of us that it's so quiet on campus. I think we'll all be glad when it gets back to normal.
Very good. Moving on to the ProtectED Code of Practice, which contains recommendations for universities around issues such as business continuity, disaster recovery, and so on. Has having these in place been of help during COVID-19 crisis, do you think?
They have been of pretty much use as we could possibly make them. I don't think anybody was prepared for this, not only in universities, but in any other industry as well. Many of us who have been in the sector for quite a number of years will remember back in 2013-ish, there was the first outbreak of SARS, as it was known in those days, SARS-1, and Ebola hit the headlines. And many of us actually did plans for that. and how we were going to shut the university down and try to reopen it. So in some ways, because we planned years ago and kept that as part of our business continuity plan and emergency response, I think there's a number of us did have a head start, which was very helpful. So we weren't working straight away when it became clear, I think in February, that something serious was happening and we could see a closure coming. So we weren't working straight away from scratch, but because we had things in place, it really did help. I think if you can start from a good spot in the first place, it does help, particularly as something that's gone on as long as this.
Thank you. We know from the research that was done when developing ProtectED that universities are rather fragmented in their approach to student safety, security and well-being, with institutions largely doing their own thing. What do you think is holding back the improvement of standards around student safety, security and well-being in the university sector?
I think initially there's actually no requirement from anybody. I think that's the biggest holdback. Nobody's forced to do anything. We're not, unless you're an external organisation working within security, nobody needs licenses. You don't actually require to have British standards. You don't have to have any sort of standard as such to be able to operate or work in the university. So that's always a drawback. And I think the SIA in the early days when they looked for volunteers to adopt their programs years ago, nobody did. And then when it became mandatory, of course, everybody had to adopt them. But I think one of the key things is that there is no requirement for people to do so. And you're right when you say people do things differently. All universities are different. So what fits me in Manchester may not fit my friend Malcolm at Leeds, or may not fit Ollie in London. So they are all very different, but the baseline will be very similar. Though I do think that's one of the key reasons that there is no requirement.
And so in that respect, you're suggesting that's different to the commercial security industry then, where you do have to follow these regulations?
The commercial area is very, very different. If you work for payment in the security industry, firstly, you need to have staff who are required under the SIA badge rules. So they have to have that. But if you employ so many people or want to go for certain contracts, people may put the ACS, for example, which is one of the key SIA standards that large companies go for, but they tend to have them because you can actually win a lot of contracts without it. So unless you've got the contract in place, you've got nowhere to go. So they have to have them in place. Some of them will work without the ACS, but they tend to be the smaller companies. So even so, they do need some sort of accreditation. So some will go for the British standard rather than the ACS. So there is a big difference between the commercial security world and the university world, where the SIA licensing and the SIA rules don't actually apply.
Yes, I see. So moving on to the role of security, how do you think the role of security in higher education has changed over the past decade?
I started in May 2010 at Salford, and the first thing that hit me when I arrived was I've got a group of what I now describe as night watchmen. The vast majority of the staff at Salford were in sheds. They sat in there all day. They unlocked buildings and they locked buildings up. And frankly, I thought they must have been absolutely bored out of their heads doing a 12-hour day like that. They had no significant interests in the job. They had no passion for the job. And I think that the first thing I noticed was we would have to change something pretty quickly here. The first thing that we did a restructure. Many of my colleagues have done this recently to enable us to look at the role and how we could improve the role basically for the students who are now paying fees. So expect a higher standard from us. For my staff, who I really wanted them to have some interest, some job satisfaction, get through the day better, happier. And when they're better and happier, they do a much better job. So the role has changed, I think, from being guards who lock and unlock doors to people who add value to the university. And without the added value, I don't think many security departments would have got the improvements that they've got. And many have got fantastic improvements, Caroline. If like me, I'm fortunate that I've been up and down the country from Edinburgh southwards. And the interest shown in the security teams with new technology, new developments, training, the openness of the university to allow the added value to take place in areas like first aid, in areas of response, better fire training, for example, but more significantly, mental health issues, dealing with students in crisis at 2 o'clock in the morning. I think 10 years ago, the vast majority of basic security officers would have struggled to find the difference between a drunk, a diabetic, and somebody who is really in crisis when they found them on the floor. I think today, the vast majority will know the difference. The mental health training that has been out in the fields, led by Richard Yates at Sheffield University, has been absolutely outstanding for the security teams in universities. The first aid is a big one. It's put for security to the front of the university. And these sort of things just add to what we do. And as a frontline service, we need to be seen to be doing a good job. And I think by adding all these different disciplines into security has benefited all of us.
And
It's changed a heck of a lot, actually, in 10 years.
And are you safeguarding students not just on the campus, but also off campus as well?
Well, depending on your Vice-Chancellor's point of view, some will only stay on campus and deal with students on campus, but others, we will go off campus into buildings that perhaps are third-party providers that work as partners with us. So we'll go and help them. And in certain zones that we have at Salford now, we'll assist students who press the emergency button on the phones. So things like that, certainly we will, but it varies between university and university. Wouldn't want to get into the argument of which one's best. I think it's whatever suits your university and what your Vice-Chancellor is comfortable with.
Thank you. It moves on to my next question, which is, in some universities, security services are fairly low down in the institutional structure. What do you think are the benefits of security being recognised and as having close links with the university senior management team?
Well, the clearest benefit, if you've got really good links, is you actually get more money. And by getting more money, it means you can do more things and you can have better control rooms and you can buy better equipment. I think it's fair to say that 10 years ago, the security team at Salford was pretty low down in the order of things. They didn't really have the investment that they deserved, and we should have had. And because at the time, the crime stats were pretty horrendous. I think it's very accurate to say, and that they are in the public domain, so I'm not saying anything out of turn there, but they were pretty awful. And subsequently, the introduction, I think, of emergency management behind the Salford riots in 2011 really did assist me in getting further. The registrar at the time, Professor Graves, who I'm sure you remember, Caroline, he stood on the front doors of the main building watching fires to the left and right, and young men with masks on walking past the university with TVs under their arms. And he recognized that we did not have the tools that we needed to be able to do the job. Big credit to him. He stayed with us all night throughout the riots and asked me what I needed. Those of you that know me and have had a look, there's quite a lot of you that have joined this afternoon know me. I tend to come straight to the point. And I told him exactly what we needed. We needed investment. We needed a proper control room. It was a bit of a standing joke that one of the 8 small monitors that we had in what was the control room, which it wasn't really a control room, if you unplugged the number 8 monitor and put a different lead in, you could watch 7 monitors and 1 episode of EastEnders. And that always shocked the heck out of me, because really that isn't where anybody wants to be. And it was from that point onwards that, because I was then allowed to bring in the gold, silver, bronze system that's well known not only in the police or the prison service where I'm from, but the military, these sort of people. And it's by having that in place that has allowed me to get really top relationships with the Vice-Chancellor and her team. All of the senior managers at the university now have to do the emergency management course, because if they don't, they actually don't complete their probationary period, which is a massive step forward from where we were 10 years ago. In situations like we're currently in, where emergencies are coming along more than you want them to, people working from home, kids having parties, various other things, they now come to security. They look to security, not only at Salford, Caroline, but many of my colleagues around the country. The Vice-Chancellors and the registrars look to security to lead on these occasions. We tend to lead the silver team. The gold teams tend to be the really top 2 or 3 senior managers, excluding the Vice-Chancellor, who doesn't sit on any of the teams. But they do come to us. They come to us on a weekend, they ask our advice, and they actually now take our advice and have done for the last few years. So where we were 10 years ago with senior managers, where security bore no part of their life whatsoever, it's now got to the situation where we are a regular part of the gold, silver and bronze teams. And they actually look to us for help. I think that's been a massive change. Because we've got such good relations, the Vice-Chancellor and the Registrar are not unknown to come down to security for a coffee and a piece of toast first thing in the morning and ask regularly, do we have what we need? Is there anything that can improve life for staff, for students? And that's only a benefit to everybody. And if you've got that type of relationship, which I'm very, very lucky to have, I know that, with Helen Marshall, it's the best way forward. In fact, for me, it's the only way forward if you can make it happen at your university.
Thank you. That moves on also to my next question, which is whether you could tell us a little bit more about the importance of communication to effective university security, both within the university, which you've touched on, but also with external organisations and agencies.
Certainly, I'll just mention further internal things first. The key people nowadays with the continued use of social media has to be the comms department. So every new member of the communications team that come to Salford University automatically now just do the 2-day emergency planning, emergency management course. John McCarthy, the Director of Communications at Salford, he leads their team, but he's now put in place a series of things such as duty manager, duty on call for comms. So a comms expert is available to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's not me or a supervisor who's on a weekend for me having to send out emergency messages via Safe Zone. We have a professional. And I think that's a big key for us, having a professional available to us 24 hours a day. Externally, the partnerships are incredibly important. Today, this morning for 2 hours, I was on the Salford City Council Partnership Delivery Group, and that's got everybody from the police, fire service, North Region Ambulance Service, and all the other blue lights, plus local councillors. And by having the relationships there, it's been an absolute godsend to us. Through that particular group, we have adopted a number of practices, both from the ambulance, the fire and the cops, that we brought into work at Salford. And we now sort of do I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back sort of arrangements, where no money passes hands, but we certainly help each other. And I think a really good example of that, and I know some of my colleagues have seen these with photographs and presentations I've done before, is the fire service, where we allow the fire service to come to Salford University and use our lift shafts as lift work, lift training for their new recruits. They use our roofs for rooftop training, and we let them show the new recruits the fire hydrants, the dry risers, and let them operate them. So we get benefits back in the fact that they're using some of our equipment and it's tested and it works really, really well. But in a different way, we put on an exercise last November, and they provided 15 fire engines of various sizes and shapes for a powder incident. And they set up all their shower facilities in a car park and ran a full-scale incident with us, along with our silver and gold teams. Now, to get that to happen, along with the police who attended as well, we closed off roads. They allowed us to do all sorts of things. In the real world, if money had have passed hands, Caroline, you are looking at a lot of money to put an exercise on like that. But because the Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service then classed it as a major exercise for them, as well as the university and the police, it didn't cost us anything. But it still meant that we could test our emergency plans and our business continuity plans. But it is in full view of everybody. And that's sometimes the problem. If these things don't go well, it is in full view of everybody. Yeah. But again, when you run one of these exercises, everybody will tell you always learn something. Yeah. You never run one of these exercises and fail to learn.
So it's potentially a win-win situation.
It is a win-win, and without the comms, without the partnerships, and without the relationships, which again is a big part of ProtectED, getting the relationships in the right place at the right time and also at the right level. Yes. Is really, really important. It's, have you got the influence to be able to do this? If you haven't, then you need to go to the people who have, because I think it is vital to have these sorts of relationships. And I am pleased to say that from my OXO hat on, when I visited many universities, that I do think that is now the case in a vast majority of universities. They are certainly very well represented locally with all the correct people that they should be. And again, we've had at national conference, the Deputy Chief Fire Officer of Greater Manchester speak. We've had people from MI5 speaking, CPNI speaking, etc., etc. And it's about getting the right people in the right place at the right time. But getting the external comms right, getting the external partnerships right is absolutely vital to move our teams forward in security in universities.
Thank you. And also with your AUXO hat on, because obviously that gives you an experience of universities across the whole country. The university sector has been criticised for not properly recording incidents. And do you think the situation is improving?
I think the situation is definitely improving. It needed to improve because sometimes when you look back, there were no records of things that should have been there. Personally, at Salford, we had to get the Vice-Chancellor's permission, but we actually publish our figures on the intranet, which is open to the public. Anybody can see what we do. The incident recording, two ways you can look at incident reporting. One is the actual reports that you send out to people, and one is the report of the actual incident itself, which I think is something I'd like to briefly touch on, if I could. The incident reporting, I remember a couple of years ago, and colleagues who have been with their universities for more than 5 or 6 years ago will remember a group where they wanted to ensure that all universities published all crime stats. And we had a vote at the AUXO conference that was most in favour of not doing that because Vice-Chancellors didn't want that to happen for various reasons. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong on that. I know Salford certainly did. And then New Aston certainly did, because Mark Sutton, who was chairman at the time, he was behind that. So we were in support of that. We had no issues with Bernard actually publishing in the guide, the one that goes in the Times, the newspaper. But the incident recording, the recording of an incident, is something I think that has improved a heck of a lot over recent years, because most people now have logists. Massive part of an incident for me, and I know it's written out in the ProtectED Code of Practice. The reason why it's important is because of a solicitor that happened at the Assizes Courts down south a few years ago. His name was Michael Mansfield. He's one of the better known QCs in the country. And he made a very short but direct statement. And it is, if it wasn't written down, it didn't happen. So unfortunately, writing the things on the back of a cigarette packet is no longer acceptable. And I think that became clear when that type of behaviour was actually criticised at a rail accident up in Cumbria a few years ago. And if there's any of the North Region guys, they'll know what I'm talking about in particular. Some people, workmen were killed on the railways. And the recording of that wasn't great, and it got heavily criticised in the courts. So the logist and the reporting suddenly becomes key. Because what, again, you have to remember, these things can be used in years ahead in courts. For those ex-police, ex-military police, etc. Like us in the prison service, an incident can happen in 2015 and not go to court while 2018, 19 or 20. It can be years later you're going to court with it. And subsequently, you can't remember every detail. And unless you have these things written down carefully and accurately, you can be in an awful lot of problems if you attend court in that way. So I think now with the HSE's regulations on top of what's happened in the courts over the last few years, it's imperative to have a logist in your emergency management group and keep full records available at any time should you be asked to do so. So two different types of incident recording there, both equally as important.
Yes, thank you. One of the more controversial aspects of university security in recent years is related to counter-radicalisation and counter-terrorism initiatives, and in particular to the government's PreventED strategy.
Yeah.
How has this affected the relationship of university security staff with students, do you think?
Well, as you know, I'm sure that the NUS, when it came out, said straight away, we didn't want anything to do with this and we will not support it. From our point of view, it's a legal requirement that we have to do it. My role at Salford University is I'm the operational lead for the Prevent strategy at the university, and there are only 3 of us on that team. That's my role within it. The students and the security staff, I don't think there's a huge difference between them because they don't really discuss it. I can't often say, if I'm honest, that I've seen security staff discussing the Prevent strategy with any students. Where it does come in, obviously, is that some of our security staff keep a very close eye on a number of students that we are asked to keep an eye on or look out for suspicious activity, misbehavior, these sort of things, anything that can point to any sort of radicalization. It's difficult sometimes to tell the difference between a drug dealer in a car and a radicalization person in a car trying to talk to students. It's the same approach. Go see what they want, see who they are, take numbers of vehicles if necessary. Security staff, like all staff at universities now, have been through a number of different levels of training, I think, with various names, RAP 3 and all these different ones. The approach that we have taken at Salford, and I think it's a good one, is that of safeguarding. We've employed a separate safeguarding officer altogether who is also on the small team that we look after the Prevent strategy with. And it's her role to work with us in security and the staffing well-being to ascertain exactly what's happening with individuals. So I think it's a full team effort, not just security and students. I think it's a full team effort with security. Has to be academic staff as well. They have to buy into this as well. Because they see the students more than security staff do, unless it's now, of course, and they only get them on the computer screen as much. But under normal times, everybody has to pull together here for the Prevent strategy. More and more committees changed again over the years when HEFCE folded and became the Office for Students. Everything's changed with them, but we still got an action plan to follow. Security do form quite a big part of that action plan about talking to people, about visually keeping an eye on people, a visual watch on what's going on. So it's not no small fry, as the saying goes. It's quite a big thing to us in security. We all have to be fully aware of what's going on and how things work.
You mentioned there the problem of drug dealing, and we understand that universities, especially halls of residence, are a target for criminals such as county lines, crime and drug dealing. What should universities be doing to reduce the risks of this to themselves and their students?
Well, the first thing that we should be doing, I think, is actually liaising with our colleagues in the police, particularly the drug squads that they have. They're regular visitors to Salford, not that we have an excessive problem, but they come to see how we're getting on, pass number plates to us if we can look out for these sort of vehicles. Vice versa, we suddenly see a vehicle. Is this a vehicle that you're looking for? Because they keep coming at various times of day and night to the accommodation blocks. And indeed, just before lockdown, we had a really good arrest at Salford with quite a lot of drugs in the back of a vehicle. And it certainly wasn't just for the university. That looked like it was going round to quite a few places. But again, it's that partnership working that we spoke about earlier, that if you can share the details, the information sharing agreements that we have is invaluable. It really is. We've got one with Greater Manchester Police, though we don't have one with Lancashire Police, but we do get Lancashire and Cheshire Force coming to ask questions and seeing if we can assist them. We've got a pretty good camera system that we can read number plates from a long way off. And we've had quite a bit of success with that. I think county lines is something that we do keep a very, very close eye on at Salford, because it's in a major city. And in major cities, this thing seems to have sprouted in all of them now. What does concern me is I do hear some people saying, "Oh, we don't have a problem with county lines." And I perhaps would say, have another look, rather than say we haven't got a problem. Just have a look to see if you have, a closer look to see if you have. Share your information with your local police and see if they want to share back, because I think in a lot of cases they will. For those that don't know the gentleman concerned, he's a member of the OXO executive team called Adrian Dennehy. Adrian leads it on behalf of OXO. He's an excellent contact to have, as is, he tends to deal with PHALO quite a lot, which is the police liaison groups for universities. And they have done great work in South Wales. And Adrian passes around to heads of security in particular around the UK about what county lines are doing, what training's available. It's a massive shame, actually, Caroline, of this virus getting in the way again. We'd actually extended the OXO conference in April this year, a day earlier, so we could have specifically a day free training on that very, very subject of county lines from an ex-gang member, which it would. I've actually seen him. That's why I wanted to bring him to conference. I spent the day with him at a conference when he was presenting in Liverpool, and I thought it was fantastic. A really, really good day. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 got in the way, but we'll see what we can do whenever we're allowed to in the future. I'm looking at Mike. Hello, Michael, over in Qatar. I've no doubt it's a lot warmer there than I am back in Wakefield. It's not really detrimental to our budgets. We've got the contacts already with the police. We've got the staff out on the ground who are trained to be looking for these in the first place. So no, sir, it's not detrimental to our budgets as such, but it is going back, Mike, on the relationships you have with your colleagues in the police. Many of you out there who I've seen on the list today are ex-police, so you've got those contacts somewhere. But that's how we do it, and we do it, again, little cost to us, if any cost at all.
Just to say that once Trevor's finished with it, well, once I've finished with the questioning, then Andrew will go through the questions that people have written down, and we'll answer some of those. So can I ask, you mentioned county lines crime. What are the emerging issues related to university security? So from your point of view, what do you think is on the radar for the next 5 to 10 years? And obviously do draw on your experience of universities across the UK as a result of working with AUXO?
I think there are big differences, Caroline, dependent upon where you are, whether you are a city centre campus or whether you're rural. But it's the usual suspects, I'm afraid. It's the terrorism stuff that we've all got to be aware of, because they haven't gone away. And I know from speaking to colleagues in certain groups over the last week or so that they're still preventing terrorist activity in the UK. It's still going on. So we've got to watch out for that. The drugs will never go away from universities. That's something that will always keep going. I think following the COVID-19 and getting back to normal, if we can say the word normal, I do think we could be on the cusp of a crime, I won't say epidemic, but a serious increase in crime. Many of the thieves, etc., they've just not been about. And subsequently, they're going to be low on cash. And I do think, particularly in the larger cities, that's something that we need to look out for in the next year or two, when this certainly started to finish. That does worry me quite considerably, as does budgets going forward. And the budgets, I hear staff being made redundant here, staff leaving there, universities wanting to shed jobs here and there. Will our budgets be the same in 12 months' time? I know mine this year has been cut considerably. I haven't really had the opportunity to speak to colleagues around the country yet about theirs, but where will we be in 12 months' time? Will we still get the investment we're getting? Will they require all of the security teams, which I think they probably will? But it's something we've got to look at. It's not a bottomless pit. So it's going to be quite interesting to see where we are in 12 months' time. So I think that's a big concern about that. I know it's not a threat as people imagine, but it is a big threat, having your budgets cut and potentially your staffing cut. And that is something I'm really concerned about at the moment.
Thank you. And so finally, to end on a more positive note, can I ask you what you find is the most rewarding aspect of your job and why?
I've as most of you know, I spent quite a long time in the prison service, and believe it or not, there's one or two not nice people in there. And so actually working in universities, I've actually found that colleagues are absolutely brilliant. I really like the colleagues I'm working with, the colleagues I meet at work. I'm incredibly lucky that, I think Roy Grundy, who's my deputy, is an absolutely fabulous guy. And it's a pleasure working with him every day. So there's the part at Salford that's just excellent because of the people. But then with my other hat on at AUXO, there's some amazing people in and around AUXO that I've absolutely loved going around with, meeting people. All of them have been fantastic with me. My time will come to a close with AUXO very shortly. And I can tell you, I have loved every second of it. And I don't regret doing what I did in any shape whatsoever. I think having the respect of the Vice-Chancellor is something that I really have appreciated over the 10 years at Salford. So I think they're the real positives for me, that I don't have to meet rapists, muggers and terrorists every day. So that's a really good reward for me.
Thank you, Trevor. That's the end of my questions. Andrew, you're going to have a look at the questions that have come from our audience. Do you want to ask some of those if they've not already been answered?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Caroline. I'm just looking at the Q&A panel. I think we have 4 questions. Some of these may overlap with some of the things that because they were added as you were speaking, Trevor. So you may have actually answered some of them on the way. But we'll start with the first one's from Derek. I believe that's Derek Willins from Advent IM Holistic Security. He asks, the historic perspective is really interesting. Great strides have been made in helping to safeguard students. What are some of the things that you see over the next 10 years that we all need to think about?
Training of staff, it would be number one. I think the training of security staff within universities is absolutely essential. We have got so many things that we can do, so many opportunities that security within a university have got to offer. You know, the more on the well-being side, suicide prevention, crisis management of a different sort that I've discussed, but crisis management of an individual student who's in serious trouble at 2, 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. The mental health side is something that I'm really, really pushing. Mm-hmm. And I'd hope that all of you out there will actually follow that, because our students deserve it, our staff deserve it. And I think really that's what we're there for. Yes, we can all lock up and shut a door and put an alarm on, but at the end of the day, we require staff who can do a little bit more than that. And I think training of staff is something that is absolutely key to all our futures. And it's the only way we're ever going to get better, is to keep improving our staff. Thanks, Derek.
The next question is actually, it says from an anonymous attendee, so I think it's somebody who hasn't put their name in, but it does relate to your previous answer. It asks, do all frontline officers have mental health training, and how has this impacted service delivery? For example, has this been recognised by the leadership team as a benefit?
I can't speak for all universities, but mine have at Salford. 16 of them, I took advantage of the training that OXO and Richard Yates from Sheffield put on. And then, of course, we've paid for our own training to be brought in by the same people, actually. We paid for groups, so our staff are all first aid mental health trained. Mm-hmm. And 16 of them have had additional mental health training. So each of my teams that I've got now, there's at least one person's got additional above the first aid mental health. They've got the 2-day, which I think is really important. Like I said, difficult sometimes to tell the difference between somebody suffering mental health issues and a diabetic at times, particularly overnight. And then, of course, in some universities, and ours is one of them, we don't have an overnight on-call person from wellbeing, and it's down to us to look after that person. And we then got to make a judgment. Do we call an ambulance? Do we get them back to the apartments? How do we deal with that individual to ensure that they don't self-harm? So I think it's vital that we actually pursue that to the best that we possibly can.
And it ties with your earlier answer. It's about, I presume it's about the professionalisation of the role, effectively, isn't it?
Well, it's very interesting phrase that, Andrew, because I've got written down here, when I arrived at Salford, they had security guards. Mm. I'd like now for the university hierarchy, UK and people like that to start recognising them not as security guards, but actually as security professionals. Mm. And the professionalisation of security within universities is something I've tried to drive from not only ProtectED, but from my OXO hat on, as well as my own role as head of security at Salford University. The professionalisation of our service has to be the way forward. I want people to look at security officers in university and say, yes, that's the best sector in the country for security. And I think with a number of the offerings that we make around, many of them, don't forget, Andrew, many of the heads of security that I know on here are excellent trainers. And, you know, we travel around the country training. I do the OXO emergency management course around the country. And we try to bring people into the sector to train them how to work in the sector, because university security is different to other security. There's very little doubt. But I've been in private security, I've worked in government security, but nothing quite prepares you for the change that working with students brings you. And it is quite rewarding. But again, let's get that title of professional security officers. Professional security staff is the phrase that really 2021 ought to be about. Let's professionalize ourselves and get that name out there.
Interestingly, Ellie from Falmouth has just popped in a question which is virtually on the same subject in terms of the title, and she mentions that at Falmouth and Exeter they titled themselves night services to reduce anxiety for students. And I think we've spoken in the past, Trevor, in ProtectED about how the term, you know, walking around with security written on your back, it's a much broader role than just, you know, what might be considered the traditional security role. So it's quite interesting that some institutions are actually changing the role title to reflect this broader responsibility, I guess.
Yeah, so some are now put in safety officers, but at Salford, a safety officer is something completely different. It's somebody that works in health and safety that looks after workshops and plant rooms. So I think somewhere security's got to be mentioned.
Yes, I think in the image for this event we have security and well-being on the back of some of these things. Okay.
I wouldn't have a problem with that. I think we used to look very official at Salford. We used to look like the police with a white shirt, black tie, and big black overcoat, all that sort of thing. And we've tried to project a softer image. The local thieves that we have in Salford still recognise us as security, but it is more approachable for students and visitors who often get lost walking around campus. So we do try to project a softer image if we possibly can.
Just flicking through, we have another question from, I think it's Andy Shulton from the OCS group, Facilities Management Security Company, who asks, how is your relationship with the local police and what sorts of joint working do you have? So you've mentioned when Caroline was interviewing you a few examples, but so you also mentioned that you have formal information sharing agreements.
We have an information sharing agreement with Greater Manchester Police. We also allow GMP, we have given them an old building that we own that is now the GMP dock training facility. So the explosives, drugs and weapon detection dogs are trained in there. We do exercises with them regularly. We have armed officers come on campus regularly to carry out their training. We've got excellent, I'll give you a really good example. We had travellers come to visit us in August, and with colleagues from Greater Manchester Police, they were gone within 24 hours, which is pretty good to get rid of the travellers before they could carry out and do much more damage than they did when they initially arrived. And that involved the dock training school as well. So we got away with that. But the police, because of their relationships, I just rang the divisional commander. We tend to have a cup of coffee at least once a month, and said, look, we've got a problem here. Can you help us? And he said, it's going to take too long with a section 60.1 before they could evict. And so we came up with other plans, and we found that the travellers didn't like the sniffer dogs in the same car park as them, and away they went. So by having these relationships, it cuts more than one way. It is good.
And I think a final question it comes from Jonathan Wells Hall, and it relates to university or student accommodation. What links do you have with private accommodation providers? And is there any suggestions for how accommodation providers can better engage with university security teams?
Yeah. Firstly, we got a group called Campus Living Villages, which are our partners with our accommodation on campus. But then we have other people at Salford. We have a group called Tramways and another one called IQ, which I think are quite national. Yeah, we meet with them monthly. We meet with the managers monthly. We have radios in each of the blocks with their overnight staff, so we can support the night staff, because even though it's off campus, and I accept that, at the end of the day, there are students. And if they need support with those students, then we will go and assist wherever we possibly can. We've now got Safe Zone, like many of you have, and night staff are visible to us on we have a large screen in the control room that shows we have a zone around the areas, and we can actually see where they are, and if they press the button, we will go to their aid. So
is there anything
partnership working.
Sorry, Trevor. Is there anything that accommodation providers themselves can do to better engage? I think that might be the angle. Is there something that they can do apart from
they need to put themselves out to talk to us?
Yeah.
They must build relationships. They must have the same. They must want to have a relationship with us as much as we want to have one with them. Because at the end of the day, everybody that's on this call now, their aim is the safety of students. And only by working together in partnership, are we ever going to achieve the safety of students to the best that we possibly can.
Yeah.
It is quite a thing for me, is that, by the way. I have to tell, I get my beanpole with that if I'm not careful, but everybody's got to work together for it.
It's about partnership working across the institution. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Trevor. That was very interesting and enlightening. And also, I'd like to thank everyone for the questions and for attending this reflections session this afternoon. Again, thank you, Trevor, for being with us and sharing your knowledge and your insight. The video from this afternoon's session will be made available on the ProtectED website, our YouTube channel, and also via Auxo. Shortly. The next ProtectED Reflections event will be at the end of the month on Thursday, the 29th of October at 11 AM, and details will be on our website shortly, so please do save the date. In the meantime, thank you for joining us. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.